Hi, this is Craig from theaffinitygame.com, the online adventure game where the objective is to help you make a friend in the real world. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a social rule. And social rules are sort of like the hidden laws that govern how we behave in society. And the funny thing about social rules is that most times people don't actually tell you what those rules are. And what's even worse is if you break a rule, let's say, for instance, you start mooing in public, people don't tell you you've broken a rule, but they just start avoiding you. And that's something that we're here to prevent. So today's rule that I'd like to talk to you about is don't be stinky. Now, what does it mean to be stinky? Stinky means having a foul or unpleasant odor about you. Some of the synonyms of stinky are malodorous, putrid, BO, which stands for body odor, and my personal favorite is funky. So what causes stinkiness? Well, now some people have medical conditions which makes them stink, and they may need to see a doctor. And we have great compassion for those people, and we hope they get that situation addressed. But that's not the situation for most of us. For most of us, we have these things called apocrine glands, and those glands develop in puberty, and they secrete an odorless, colorless liquid that actually attracts bacteria. And bacteria love those secretions, and they eat them and begin digesting them and breaking them down, and it releases this putrid, gaseous substance that most people really don't like. So stinkiness is a violation of a social rule because it's a violation of a greater rule, which is respecting other people's personal space. So when you're stinky, you have like this cloud of funkiness that extends into somebody else's personal space, and generally they don't like that. They feel violated when your stench permeates their area. Many people will just avoid a stinky person as opposed to tell them that they stink. And I've had that experience as well, where someone was very, very stinky and I wish I were a better person and that I would have told them, but really I just avoided them. So again, we're here to try and prevent that from happening. One other thing to keep in mind about being stinky is that everybody really gets stinky from time to time. So it's not about perfection. It's not about being a stinky person versus a non-stinky person. It's really just maintaining these simple steps so that you're not stinky. So without further delay, I'm going to present you the 5 steps to not be stinky. Step number 1 is you'll want to shower or bathe, preferably every day. I realize you may not be in that situation, but you should just try and bathe as regularly as possible. And here's where you want to use a good soap. If you're a person who has hair, as I used to have, you'll want to use shampoo. And a little bonus tip is to moisturize. I particularly like this one because it's got a nice coconutty smell to it. Step number 2 is you must use deodorant because you can shower every day, but if those apocrine glands begin working again, you're going to develop a new cycle of funk. So you can use stick, you can use roll-on, you can use spray, whatever you prefer, but you must use deodorant. Now, a caveat to that is if you're a young person, if you're below puberty, well, those apocrine glands are not working and you probably shouldn't use deodorant. You may want to ask your mom or your dad or your guardian all about that. I also know that there are some natural alternatives if you're concerned about the ingredients. I don't know what those are, but you can look them up. Step number 3 is you must wash your clothes. And there are certain clothing where there's a little more flexibility, like pants. You might be able to wear that 2 or maybe even 3 times if you weren't that active. But most things you're going to want to wash them after you use them. Socks, for instance, are something you're going to want to wash every time. You're also going to want to make them mate, but I don't have time to talk about that social rule. Let me just say, these bad boys, no further discussion. Got to wash those every time. Step number 4 is you must brush your teeth. And this is a special close-in situation where you can really funk somebody out with your breath. So you're going to want to use good toothbrushes and make sure you change them regularly. A good toothpaste. You never know what's hiding between those choppers, so flossing is highly recommended. And then a little bonus tip is you may want to use some mouthwash as well. Step number 5, and this is, you're only going to get this at theaffinitygame.com because we spend all day thinking about these things, is you need to solicit some honest feedback from somebody. Somebody who will really give it to you straight, someone who cares about you and you trust, and you can just directly ask them, hey, do I stink? Can you tell me about that? So one little tip when you're choosing somebody who's going to tell you whether or not you stink, you may want to make sure that they're not a stinker as well. So for instance, if you have a favorite uncle who spends all day shoveling manure, he may not be the best person to ask. That's a very honorable thing to do, shoveling manure. I shoveled manure myself when I worked in a stable briefly. I'm merely suggesting that that person who's shoveling manure may not be able to tell you honestly whether or not you stink. So those are the 5 steps. Shower regularly, use deodorant, wash your clothes, brush your teeth, and 5, solicit honest feedback from somebody that you care about. So if you feel like I've left something out or I've got something wrong, just note that in our comments section. This is Craig from theaffinitygame.com.